From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is Road Signs. Here is your host, Seth Clevenger.
Thank you for listening to Road Signs, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we're going to take a fresh look at the research and development work that's paving the way for self-driving trucks. With each passing year, we've seen continued investment, expanded on-road testing, and new fleet pilots focused on solving the technical and operational challenges of deploying fully autonomous trucks in specific applications. Tech developers and their industry partners are now closer than ever to making this vision a reality, but when will autonomous trucks be ready for a commercial rollout? And how and where will the industry deploy this technology when that time comes? I raised those questions during a visit to Torc Robotics testing center in Albuquerque, New Mexico back in November. While I was there, I had the opportunity to ride along in one of Torc's self-driving trucks to get a first-hand look at how the company's autonomous driving system navigates challenging real-world traffic conditions. You can read my coverage from that event by visiting ttnews.com or subscribing to Transport Topics at ttn.ws/ttsubscribe. You can also text TT-subscribe to 571-622-0001. After the ride-along demonstration, I sat down with Torc CEO Peter Vaughan Schmidt and Joanna Buttler, head of Daimler Truck's Global Autonomous Technology Group, to discuss when autonomous trucks will come to market and how they could fit into the freight transportation industry. Let's play that interview now. I'm here at Torc Robotics Testing Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I'm very excited to speak with Torc CEO Peter Vaughan Schmidt and also Joanna Buttler, head of Daimler Truck's Global Autonomous Technology Group. Thank you both for taking some time out of a busy event to chat with me.
Thank you, Seth, for having us.
So during this visit, I had the opportunity to ride along in a self-driving Freightliner Cascadia outfitted with Torc's autonomous driving system. So this is a pretty complex driving environment, I would say. Just as a driver myself in a passenger car, can imagine how difficult this would be to navigate for a professional driver with all the traffic, pretty abrupt lane changes to get where you need to go and navigate the intersections and interchanges in the highway system here in Albuquerque. And also some pretty aggressive drivers I noticed on the road out here. So it seems like this is a pretty challenging environment, but during that ride-along, it was just over 30 minutes, no disengagements from highway on-ramp to off-ramp, and that included multiple lane changes and moderate to even heavy traffic. The truck negotiated on and off ramps, and also an intersection with a stoplight, which I know is part of what the system will handle as well. So I'll start with you, Peter. Just talk about the progress you've made, especially in the past year or so, to really refine the system, to smooth out all the question marks and prepare for all the edge cases you may encounter as you work toward ultimately commercializing the product.
Yeah, I think this year our main theme was really to make the transformation from technology development to really developing a product. And it sounds similar, but it's really something different. A product must be something which is super reliable, and so it's working really on the foundation, on the entire sensor and compute suite, making it, we call it production intent, automotive grade. And last not least, of course, working hard on all those virtual driver features, from perceiving our environment, to fusion, to behavior, but also all support structures which are needed, for example, simulation, so that we can validate and prove that our system gets safer and safer and safer, and we are progressing to the ultimate goal of taking out a safety driver in the year 2027. Yeah. It was an exciting year on this journey.
For sure. And then from the Daimler Truck perspective, of course, it's not just the technology, it's also the vehicle. And there's been a lot of work in recent years to build this safety redundant Freightliner Cascadia chassis with redundant steering, redundant braking, along with some other systems to make sure if there's a critical failure and there's no driver on board, there's a backup system in place. So Joanna, just take us through all the work that's gone into getting this vehicle that we see on the road today so often ready for autonomous operations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I want to comment on your intro that it's amazing the appreciation you get for truck drivers and the tasks that they fulfill for all of us, right? Like anything that we use is brought in by a truck, and going through this journey, really learning about how trucking works, right? Not just providing a vehicle, but also providing a business solution to our customers has been part of that journey. And then it all starts, as you mentioned, with a good foundation, which is really the autonomous ready truck with all the different redundancy components that really have to be there to act as backup systems in case we have a failure. And we've come a long way. I mean, it started all with basically a set of requirements, over 1,500 requirements that we have collected from our partners like Torc Robotics, and then turned into actually the design that you see today in those trucks. So from that start, from really a list of those requirements to now having a product, or are on our way to really a series product, has been a great journey. So we call it C-sample maturity, or you can also refer to it as pre-production trucks. So all of the systems like the braking, the steering, the power net that actually has to ensure that you have the right levels of power generated at all times, and all the critical systems are powered up at all times, has been further developed. We've made various iterations of those designs. We've learned early on, together with the feedback that we're getting from our partners, but also what we learned by taking the prototype truck that we first built up in our prototype shop, and now we've been taking it actually to our production plants. So now there's a whole other slew of things that we're learning, because we're moving from manually assembling these trucks to actually implementing series production processes to be able to assemble them at the same reliable, repeatable quality that our customers so appreciate. And we want to make sure that those trucks are just as great as the traditional Freightliner Cascadias that they're running today.
Yeah, really running, from the prototypes on the road today to getting closer and closer to that final production mass-produced model. And Peter, you mentioned the time frame for commercializing this technology. That's always one of the first questions that always comes up, and I'd say that Torc has been maybe more guarded or cautious than some of the other players in the space on setting a firm time for a target for commercializing and launching. But based on conversations and guidance earlier this year from Daimler Truck, 2027 is that target to commercialize, and then looking to scale up deployment from there through 2030. So just tell us a little bit about that road to commercial launch, where we are here to where we will be at that point where this is a commercial product on the road. You laid out some of the initial lanes, starting with you announced here today this initial lane from Laredo to Dallas in Texas, north-south, Mexico into Texas. Tell us about how you're going to prove the case in that first lane, improve the return on investment, and then from there, eventually turn these vehicles and the technology over to your fleet customers. You're spot on. First, we announced 27. Why? Because I think we are pretty sure now and self-confident that we will have all pieces together by then. And also can prove it out to ourselves, to Daimler, to society, to regulators. So that is really a safe thing and a mature product by then. And by the way, that includes a lot. That's the software, it's the vehicle, but it's also the entire ecosystem and so on. We decided that the cool thing about this technology, it's not really about a lane or two hubs on a lane or something like this. In the end, we are developing a capability and a feature set that can serve more or less everything I-40,000. And it's just a question, where are we starting with the first application, and where are we then scaling next? But it's all foreseen here. If you only can do one lane with two hubs, this is not really a product. So it's more important that we're really developing something broader, which can be scaled, then just start somewhere. And here we're listening to our customers. With all the nearshoring which is going on, a lot more freight entering from Mexico into US, that they gave us the strong advice to look to this route. And we listened to our customers. In the end, we want that our technology gets applied by fleets and creates value for the fleets.
And so that's why this might be the starter.
Yeah, good starting point. And it's interesting to see how the conversation has shifted. I mean, I remember a number of years ago when it really felt like the conversation was really tied to freight kind of flowing from the Southern California ports and into the rest of the country, especially along the Sun Belt. But there are all kinds of different opportunities in the Southwest as a sort of this first emerging market for autonomy in the trucking industry. Along the way, I think Torc is in a pretty unique position compared to some of the other autonomous vehicle manufacturers and developers because it's an independent subsidiary of a truck manufacturer. That's not the usual model that's out there today. So, of course, that matters. That matters a lot because there's so much very important integration work to tie this virtual driver, the sensor suite, the software in with a vehicle that's designed to operate autonomously at the factory level. So maybe just describe this working relationship between Torc and Daimler. How the independent subsidiary, but it's a closer relationship than perhaps working with a completely separate third-party entity. What are some of the advantages of that approach, Joanna, and how does that inform how Daimler and Torc work together?
Yeah, as mentioned, I think we get to really give each other feedback so much earlier on. So again, it starts with understanding the requirement, and we can go back and forth on those and how we turn the requirements into a specific design. Let me give you an example. For example, if Torc tells us what the sensor suite requirements are, where they are positioned, we will take that in as input, but then our designers will go in and actually make sure that it integrates nicely into the roof cap, for example. Then we will play that back to Torc and say, hey, this is how we envision the sensor placement, and they will have to verify that it meets their perception, field of view requirements. From there, we can then say, okay, now we have a design that we want to go to production with, and then the productionization starts, so to speak. And having that constant collaboration and back and forth, and basically two teams that kind of like complement each other in their strengths and capabilities is really critical. But at the same time, also know how to speak the same language, so they understand and can translate requirements into features or hardware designs and vice versa. So that's one aspect. The other aspect I want to mention, besides just building up the truck, integrating the level 4 technology, is, as Peter mentioned, it takes really also a view on how do we go to market, what's the entire ecosystem. We've started to look at the customer value chain or the customer's journey, so to speak. And we realized that even from, let's say, the order process to second life, we have to work together on each step along the way to identify who's doing what, who's providing what type of service, who has which role, and then how do we ensure that this is seamless for our customers. Our customers expect from us uptime, serviceability, a great customer experience, a product that ultimately provides them a higher value. And in order to ensure that, the processes and the interactions with our customers have just to be best in class as well. And then we can align and refine that on a daily basis, and together with our customers work on that process as well.
Sure. Anything to add to that, Peter, from your perspective leading the team at Torc?
It's a big fun to collaborate with Freightliner DTNA. I think this integrated approach is also really the only approach that will give you a safe, scalable product. You have so many advantages over retrofitting something in prototype shops. If this is really created without IP barriers and comes from assembly lines, this is really a really great thing. It's also good that Torc is led as an independent company, because in the end we are building a really big, strong software company. That's a virtual driver, which is then integrated into really, really complicated vehicle, robot, however you want to call it. And I think it's important that it is a really different skill set. And so you have the best of both worlds, but you also manage them. We manage us like you should manage a software company, and Joanna is managing the vehicle like a best-in-class vehicle manufacturer does it. And I think that's how you create a really world-class product in the end.
Hello, roadside listeners. Dan Ronan here from Transport Topics. I'm here to tell you about our new extended cuts of the Road Signs podcast. If you like what you learn here, I think you're going to really love this. So what is the Road Signs extended cut? Well, instead of ending the recording and saying our guest farewells, we're keeping our expert guests around for an extra 1 or 2 questions to gather a deeper, fuller picture of the influential topics in transportation. We capture that insight and convert it into a printable download that will help you navigate the latest trucking trends and guide your next business decision. Considering the easy, linkable, and printable format, you can keep the extended cut for your next big meeting, send it to your friends and colleagues, or pack it up for your next big conference. So how do you get the latest download? Well, it's real simple. Visit ttn.ws/extended cut. That's ttn.ws/extended cut.
And of course, along the way, in the past year plus, Torc has been conducting some pilots with actually some of the biggest names in commercial trucking. We had some executives from Schneider and CR England at this event, and one of the highlights, I think you mentioned one of your longest, or I imagine your longest pilot route is about 1,000 miles from Phoenix to Oklahoma City, and I think that's a very interesting example of what might be possible if you stretch the limits, but. Could you give us an overview of these pilot programs and how where you're operating today with your customers, what type of freight you're moving, and what you're learning, what Torc is learning from working with these industry partners? Peter, I'll start with you on this. How you're learning and what they're learning as you collaborate together on these pilots.
Yeah, our first pilots we did around Albuquerque, and Albuquerque is in the middle on this long stretch of the 1,000 miles from Phoenix to Oklahoma City. We might then do other routes going forward on pilots, but the learning is enormous. First of all, what does it really take in terms of operation to cover 1,000 miles? From the software, from the mapping, but also from the arrival, from the departure, all the tracking in between. Is your system healthy? Will you arrive on time? And by the way, we heard it today from the customers, 100% on time, always safe, and the load was never damaged. I liked it very, very much to hear this feedback from the customers. But we really learn a ton. What does it mean to operate such a product? And that there's wind, there's rain, there is congestion, there's night, there's day. I mean, you really expose your system over such a long stretch to so many things, which is great. And then, of course, the other aspect is the interaction with the customer, especially upon arrival and departure. How does that work? What needs to be done? How does it integrate into their system? How do you even get an order, so to say, to the truck? That's your mission. Go. A ton of learnings.
Yeah, because there's so much more than just the truck, right? There's and you laid out how some jobs could even shift a little bit. In the future, dispatcher could become a autonomous vehicle manager, dispatcher, and a person working at a transfer hub for an autonomous vehicle will handle some of those the physical requirements like refueling, topping off the the DEF and pre-trip inspections that still require a person to do. It's not fully automated, but you can see how there are almost new career paths coming into being because of this. Joanna, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on how you see industry jobs potentially changing, right? Not just the driver, but also which driver jobs could shift potentially to more regional and local routes to support hub-to-hub autonomous operations, but also these jobs that happen around transfer hubs and also managing and providing services to support an autonomous trucking operation.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe real quick, just to talk about the driver job in itself. We also believe that autonomy can really improve the quality of the job of a driver, allowing him or her to be home at night with a family every night, be home at the weekends with their family. So I think that is definitely a benefit. And then, as we saw today, new jobs may emerge, call them mission managers, for example, a person that oversees the entire autonomous mission, that gives also the okay of the launch. of the autonomous vehicle after all the checks have been completed by the hub operator. So you'll have new roles and new interactions that will form in the industry. But at the same time, I also want to make sure it's not going to be so disruptive that these are jobs that couldn't evolve from already existing roles.
Right.
Like you mentioned the dispatcher, for example. And as we identify those roles and the tasks early on, actually this is part of the transformation as well. And we can start communicating that with the workforce. We can start building out training programs and upskilling programs now, identifying what it is that we're looking for in those roles, in that personnel that is going to perform that, and working with customers together. And we heard it also today that they're very open in understanding that, and even have potentially their own infrastructure, how they can broadcast and promote that within their workforce. So I think that's great. But even simple things like the role of a vehicle technician at a dealership. We are adding new components, new technology. We're trying to keep, obviously, safety is always is the primary motivation, but we're also thinking about a little bit of simplicity. How do I introduce this technology without any shock value or disruption? So we have components in the redundant chassis that are upgraded or have software on them that is, yes, new and innovative, but the component itself, take, for example, the alternator, 48-volt alternator that we're introducing looks exactly the same like today's 12-volt alternator. It packages in the same way, so a technician should know exactly what to do when they have to replace or repair it. But of course, they have to understand there's a lot of software that's on this vehicle today, and the roles of diagnostics, commissioning of the vehicle, and really the understanding how to manage a very software-driven tool now is also going to be important. And so my team, for example, as we are developing the autonomous platform, so the vehicle, we're at the same time also developing the proper documentation, training material, how to upskill, first of all, our technicians in our prototype shop, right, so they know how to handle it. And then from there, it will scale eventually to all the technicians at our service locations.
Yeah, well, it's really fascinating to think of, today's truck technicians. Some of them may, their career path may lead them to become, autonomous truck technicians at some point in their career. And sounds like a pretty cool, exciting job to be at the forefront of. And just going back to, again, what this all means for drivers, I always think that's a very important part of the conversation whenever we talk about autonomy, how, the industry's workforce will interact with it. And, talking to developers like Torc and also talking to your prospective customers, it makes it very clear that, the industry views this as something that's going to complement the industry's workforce, not replace it. This is something that will potentially allow fleet operators to expand their operations, improve the efficiency of their operations, and hopefully improve the jobs of professional drivers and to better suit their lifestyle preferences, more home time, and really kind of craft that, future jobs that the next generation of truck drivers, will want to hopefully, make into a career. And really addressing one of the industry's biggest, longstanding pain points, which of course is recruiting and retaining drivers. Peter, you want to just talk to that, and speak to that, the challenge and of building and supporting the industry's workforce, but also how autonomy can support that. How fleets are going to hopefully build some better jobs in the future, and also address what I think is the misguided narrative that this is going to replace driver jobs, which is still out there, right, and still has to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, there is a driver shortage, so and we're trying to address this, but this technology won't come overnight, and I do not even think that it has the potential to replace the entire driver shortage. So it will remain, it will be still a job that is in high demand, and it might be more attractive, as you said. There's the opportunity that you drive more local and let some, maybe also overnight routes to the robot. Yeah. That will improve life. That might be good for society, shifting transport into night, reducing congestion, making transport more efficient. In the end, a more efficient supply chain, that means goods arrive faster, but usually also at lower cost. They could drive down cost for all of us, because all the goods that you have in a grocery store has been at least once on a truck, your milk, your food, your vegetables. Though I think there are a lot of good things that can come from this technology. And in terms of job, we touched upon this, it also creates a ton of new jobs, not only highly paid software jobs, but also mission managers on the hub, and I think, and also for technicians, pretty cool tech to handle. I'm sure they will like it.
Hey, Road Signs listeners, it's your man, Mike Freeze, here to tell you that the call-in lines are open. What does that mean, you may ask? Isn't this a podcast, not a radio show? You're correct, but we found a new way that you can call in and leave myself or my co-host Seth Clevenger a message. Leave us a message on new topics you'd like to hear more about, or ask questions you may have about the trucking industry. Give us a ring at ttn.ws/speakpipe.
Of course, where we are today with the current state of technology, current state of development, there's a safety driver behind the wheel. There's a safety conductor or operations specialist in the passenger seat. That's how you're testing on public roads today. Certainly out of an abundance of caution to do that as safely as possible. And of course, that was my experience on the ride along. Of course, you see how the safety driver essentially hands over control to the autonomous driving system when you get to the on-ramp. But they're still very much overseeing how the vehicle is operating. But of course, the goal is to enable fully autonomous unmanned operations on, again, these certain freight lanes on the highways, specific routes that are targeted and well suited to the automation. But how do you know when the time is right to pull the safety driver and begin unmanned operations and early unmanned testing on public roads? And I know that 2027 target is there, but how do you know when indeed we are ready, the time is right?
We call it validation concept. So we have a concept how to prove to ourselves and but also then to regulators that it's safe to remove the driver, and we are measuring with safety performance indicators how we are progressing towards this target. We're making really, really good progress there. We are not there, so that's why we are still testing, and testing is done in a really, really responsible way. So we are first testing the software, then we go in simulation, we have close calls, hardware in a loop, software in a loop, then we do a pretty limited street test on public roads with the crews, and then we keep all of this until all parameters are on the target levels, so that we can really prove it's safe. And this will still take some time. We are making really good progress, but that's why we are also saying, hey, 27 for us is the time. But it's more than just the software that needs to be finished by then. You also need your super reliable, redundant foundation, the autonomous ready cascadier, same for sensors and computes, same for the entire mission management and ecosystem. Though all the things will be ready by 27. And we have a lot of checkpoints in between.
Okay, well, great. It would be very interesting to watch the progress these next few years on the way to that commercial launch. And we're at a stage now, I think, where it's really almost amazing to think back to where this all began and this conversation began. Because I started at Transport Topics 12 years ago, nobody was talking about autonomous trucks. That was not a conversation. So you go back to 2015, I believe it was, with the unveiling of the Freightliner Inspiration truck, right? This is the first big concept of a self-driving truck. That concept, of course, has evolved since then, but has been 8+ years, and really sparked a conversation at that time. And I remember some of the initial reactions, and some it still felt very futuristic in 2015, almost like the Jetsons. But here we are now, right? All these pilots on the road today. Yes, with a safety driver, but the technology is getting closer and closer to commercialization. So, Joanna, just looking back, maybe just reflect on where we are today and how far we've come since 2015.
Yeah, I usually like to look into the future, you strategize what will the future look like, but sometimes it's just nice just to pause and kind of reflect and think back exactly what you just said. And yes, in 2015, we launched the Inspiration Truck, which was the first truck that was automated and licensed to run on public roads. And yes, it was certainly a concept truck. It was a very bold vision that we put out there, but it was kind of the spark that initiated a lot of other technologies and not just conversations, but ultimately really the development of it. For example, today we have the so-called level 2 semi-automated or advanced driver assistance systems in series production.
Right.
And things like that Inspiration Truck certainly inspired those developments, and the idea of, hey, if we had if we can automate certain driving performances, we can make the truck safer, we can add driver comfort, and ultimately, reduce accidents on our roads. And then from that point on, and I think it was really beginning of 2019, where then we put out the next big bold statement, which was, we're going from level 2 to level 4. We'll skip level 3, and we believe in level 4 highly automated driving, meaning not needing a human under certain conditions. And then really that whole partnership and collaboration with Torc started that year. And even the same year, Peter, it was your birthday, September 6th, just in case somebody would say happy birthday on that date. Sorry for revealing that. We actually already had our first Freightliner Cascadia with the Torc stack running. I believe it was in a test track, but it was running autonomously. And then after that, shortly after, we already ran on public roads. So it's just amazing to just reflect on how a vision can turn into reality if you have the right people, if you have the right strategy, and you do it in the right phases.
Yeah, certainly. It's just amazing year to year. You see the progress, and then you add those years together, and it really has been a lot of progress. And Peter, I'll ask your same thought on that, and how far we've come really since the middle of the last decade to where we are now.
Yeah, the progress is just amazing, and you were remembering this first drive, that it was the first time that I started really believing, hey, this could become reality. I think key success factor, by the way, is we stick to our strategy from day one. We said the most promising business case is trucking, and by the way, that's our business. It needs focus, so that we said, okay, let's start with Class 8 US, Cascadia, nothing else, no hobbies. And we really stick to the strategy, and we always said, hey, it will be end of the decade. Now we got a little bit more specific with 27, but we never entered the hype cycle. So that's why we are also now not that depressed. We always had the core beliefs, hey, it must be on automotive-grade sensors, automotive-grade computes, fully integrated system, because we want to build a product that can meet cost targets and reliability targets. Yeah, not a tech demonstrator. And it's cool now seeing this, because in the meanwhile, there's so much progress in the base things. Yeah, today there are LiDAR laser scanners used in level 3 highway pilot systems, and now they are ready. 3, 4, 5 years they were not ready. You had to do your homegrown things. Same with imaging radars, same with the compute, but also all the progress that has been made in simulation, or AI, ML, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, that just brought the performance of our system and of perception to complete next level. All of this we can now leverage, put together, and concentrate our money really on the core development of the virtual driver stack for the truck, but in the periphery benefiting from all the things that the entire industry has done. And I think we had a really good timing with 27, and now it's really realistic.
Yeah, for sure. And in the interest of time, I'll maybe just ask each of you for final thoughts on what's next for autonomous trucking, and just what the real potential is for what it can truly do for not just fleet operators, but also for society. Joanna, if you want to take a first crack at that, and if you kind of project forward, and as we see this technology on the road and fully deployed, how can this really improve the movement of freight?
Yeah, I'm going to put it out there. We really always say we have a vision of zero fatalities, zero unplanned downtime for customers, and eventually even zero emissions. So while we launched this product with a diesel technology in the first launch, we can also envision that it will scale, and we actually prepare for that to other platforms, other markets, other propulsion technologies. So yeah, looking ahead into the future, I hope and I truly believe that this technology will ultimately provide a more reliable, safer, and equitable transportation to all of us. That means our clothing, our food, we will all receive, just in time, reliably, and at an affordable cost, and that's what keeps us moving.
Yeah, Peter, anything to add to that?
No, really, I think our economy and the quality of our lives really relies on supply chain efficiency and supply chains that work. And this technology has just a ton of potential to keep our supply chains efficient, make them even faster. Just think of all the cool things if goods arrive in half of the time. I think there can be a lot of really good things once this technology hits ground and scales. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, certainly fascinating to write about it and cover it in the trade press. But this has been a really good conversation. I appreciate again the time and all the insights here, and also just the opportunity to see this in person. Right, it means a lot more, and you learn a lot more riding along, and also spending some time at this facility rather than just hearing about it from a distance. So thank you for the invitation. Thanks for hosting some of the trade media here, and also thanks for your conversation on this podcast. Thanks again, Joanna and Peter, and appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our original questions. When will autonomous trucks be ready for commercialization? And how and where will the industry deploy this technology when that time comes? As we've heard during this episode, tech developers continue to work with truck manufacturers and motor carriers to address the many technical and operational considerations for autonomous trucks. Autonomous driving technology will need to integrate with specialized trucks equipped with redundant systems and components to ensure safety when there's no longer a driver behind the wheel. And fleet operators will need to prepare facilities to serve as autonomous truck hubs and train their workers to maintain, dispatch, and monitor these vehicles. Autonomous truck developers have announced varying timeframes for commercial deployment. Torc, for one, is targeting 2027. But across the board, these companies envision rolling out this technology in phases, starting with small-scale deployments, typically in the Southwest, then scaling up volumes and expanding to more lanes over time. Ultimately, autonomous trucking could become a new mode of transportation, much like truck rail intermodal, that gives fleets and logistics companies another way to move freight while working to increase road safety, drive down costs, and even create more appealing jobs for the next generation of professional drivers. If you've enjoyed this episode of Road Signs, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If my questions have sparked questions of your own, share them with me and the Road Signs team. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. Also, let us know how we did by texting TT Survey to 571-622-0001. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with a fresh episode of Road Signs. Until then, I'm Seth Clevenger. Thank you for listening.